Hey, Toolboxers, welcome to episode 273 of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox podcast. We're talking with Jonathan Grode, Managing Director and Managing Attorney of Green and Spiegel. They're a pretty big, large firm in the United States, a lot of immigration attorneys. And we're going to get into talking about 2023 and how things are going to look and how to prepare for it. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be talked about this when it comes to the ups and downs of the economy and how it affects the immigration law practice, not only when it goes down, but when it goes up, how to handle it. We're going to get more into that stuff as my firm is growing, the stuff I'm learning and studying, I'm going to share with you. But first and foremost, they're scaring the hell out of us about what's going to happen in 2023, talk of recession, depression, blah, blah, blah. How do we beat that as immigration attorneys to not only not fail, but also succeed and just with preparation. So we're going to talk about some stuff here, and we're going to continue the discussion in the future, have more talks about this. If you have thoughts and things about this, email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com, because I want to hear what you have to say, to learn from it and share the experience. One cool thing about immigration law is we're not necessarily competitors in this space. Everything we could do to get the word out that people should have immigration lawyers, and if we could be better immigration attorneys, we're all going to make more of it. And that's why I started this podcast in the first place, in the magazine, giving away the secrets, if you will, because I believe, and it's worked for me, by sharing this information, we all do much better. Having said that, if you like this show, if you like this program, like and subscribe wherever you're watching, leave a nice 5-star review so that the algorithm will help us get the word out about what we're doing here. And also, next thing, you've heard it before, the conference is coming up very fast, February 24th in Los Angeles or Santa Monica, California. We're going to talk about O1 visas, A to Z, have experts, the best mentors you can find in Los Angeles and in Southern California coming together to teach a wonderful course about O1 visas. So you could add a practice area. So in 2023, you can make more money and more business, one that's repeat business too, because you have 2 extensions on the O1, as well as, maybe your staff members go out there, or you just learn and you share that information. That's going to be hopefully a recording. Recordings, it might not work and stuff, but we'll get that information and share it with your team and all that too. But we should have an expert team recording as well. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. The conference, we're together from morning till night. We're gonna have a good time there. The new the issue of the Toolbox magazine is out, issue number 6. Tons of good articles in there that are gonna help your practice as well. New practice areas about Interpol red notices. You can get business on that. You can learn how to deal with that when this time comes. Fraud and K1 cases, what consular officers are thinking about from a former consular officer. Tons of stuff there. Just go to iltbox.com, check it out at immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com/magazine. And I want to thank our sponsor. They would sponsor the podcast and the magazine, DocaWise.com, all-in-one solution for forms and management for an immigration law practice. Got so many new benefits and new services that they're coming out with every day. It's just nonstop. Go to this website to get extra 10% off your annual plan, DocaWise.com/immigration-lawyers-podcast, and use the code Immigration Lawyers Podcast. You're gonna learn something and about the program. It's really good. If you have it already, you could get a better deal. If you don't have it, you could get it and get a good deal, or you can at least experience it, do a test run, talk with them, and see how it compares with the software you're using now or you want to be using in the future. Having said all that, that's about it. Let's start the show. Hey, John, thanks for coming on the show. So let's get started. It's a really important topic of 2023. Like it's like a consensus that it's going to be an awful year, and depression, recession, all this kind of stuff. There's a contrarian aspect that I see when everyone agrees. It might be the opposite. So maybe 2024 is when the bad happens, but we get surprised. But I mean, it's a reasonable expectation that things going bad with the job losses that are happening, especially like these are like tech sector jobs, people getting paid 6 figures. These are people that could afford lawyers, and their employers do EB cases, and they hire for marriage cases and for NATs and stuff because they got the money for it. So it doesn't look good. Could you talk first about like what your firm looks like, so people get an idea of like, the size and what you're dealing with, the kind of case you deal with, and then let's talk about, how we're going to deal with the upcoming year.
Yeah, definitely. And it's always great to be here with you, John. I appreciate having me back. And, it's these kind of discussions, I think, that really do help practitioners and, stimulate ideas amongst us. So, I will say from the very beginning, I certainly have a lot of questions and maybe not all the answers, but I got a few opinions and I'm happy to roll through it. I'm the managing partner of Green and Spiegel. We only practice immigration. We are an international immigration firm at this point, which is cool. We were founded in Canada. I opened the U.S. offices. We have 4 offices in the U.S. right now. We just opened our first European office in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, in September. So yeah, we're a pretty decent size as far as an immigration firm goes. As far as a law firm goes, I would say we're probably still a big small firm,
Yeah.
but
If immigration field, and you're one of the bigger firms with
yeah,
our niche, yeah.
yeah, and it does allow us to really handle a lot of projects, of any size for any clients, like bringing over multiples of people. But in the same respect, it also gives me kind of a good sense on where corporate America is in terms of hiring and what we're seeing from our corporate clients. Even in the last couple of months, is sort of, a telltale sign of what's actually probably going to be involved in 2023. Um, I'll be honest with you. I think this is going to be an interesting recession. I think we're already in the recession. It's just the pandemic has really thrown off hiring. And like, let's face it, like immigration firms, if you practice primarily business immigration, like your amount and volume of work is dictated by hiring trends. If companies are hiring, a certain percentage of them are going to be foreign nationals, and a certain percentage of them are going to need visas, and a certain percentage of them are going to hire lawyers to do it. Um, when those trends reverse, or when you have companies like in layoff posture or hiring freezes, what we say is the organic growth, the growth of our clients, which propels the growth of the firm, tends to slow down or even retreat a little bit. But what's interesting about this pandemic in particular, John, is I find that jobs in and of themselves are not a fair indicator. Usually changes in job and hiring are sort of the primary indicator of what's going on with an economy in terms of growth or recession. Because of what happened with the pandemic, I think it's turned things on its head a little bit. I do kind of see this as being a white collar recession rather than a blue collar one. I think, the demands that we see on the H-2B visa program, what we're seeing with low and unskilled workers, even though there's not a lot of visa options available for them, I don't think that demand is going to go anywhere. And, frankly, I think it's a little bit artificially created because of some of the actions of the Fed and the way they've been moving benchmark interest rates. Um, but in the same respect, I think one of the things that we've seen is the economy is moving very quickly from a historic perspective. So if you imagine like hiring and terminating staff as sort of a pendulum, that the pandemic really swung that pendulum into like a hyper speed, because it was like overnight everybody was laid off, except in the tech sector, which was sort of fascinating because even in June of 2020, we had less than 2% unemployment in the tech sector while everybody else was being laid off. That pendulum swung very hard this way from the end of 21 through the majority of 22, where hiring became impossible. There was nobody available last summer. Like, and we were looking for people, we couldn't find anybody. And now we're seeing it kind of swing back. But like to have these sort of ups and downturns within the economy in such rapid succession, to me, is really unparalleled. I think that bodes well in a lot of respects, in terms of this being short-lived. I do see a lot, I read a lot of these sort of financial prognostications and what people are thinking is going to happen. My best guess is that we might see a rough Q1 and Q2. But things will sort of level out as we get along to the second half of next year. Fascinatingly, like maybe it's because it's the holiday season and people are slowing down making announcements and things like that, but that big rash of layoffs that we saw in November has subsided somewhat.
Well,
From a tech.
there's a lot of firing right before Thanksgiving. I just
Yeah.
had an employee at a I got to anonymize about a big financial firm who was on a foreign visa get fired yesterday, layoffs. So it's like it's a mixed bag. I mean, there was a lot of visible stuff happening in Thanksgiving. Now, you mentioned something about the amount of hiring in our field. Like there was a while there where I was just seeing every day someone posting paralegal position, immigration lawyer position. I still see it as kind of tapered off. It wasn't as crazy as it was 6 months ago, where every day someone's looking for an immigration lawyer. So you've noticed that kind of slowed down as well.
Oh yeah, and I mean even in our own hiring trends, because we're getting a lot more candidates per job posting than we were even 4 or 5 months ago. Like this, we're doing a little bit of an expansion hiring right now, and we've had really great candidates. I'm actually like pleased by the candidates that we're seeing, but in the same respect, it's sort of indicative of where the industry is going. So, I think though that hiring push that we saw across all of America, like from sort of summer of 21 through summer of 22, is unlike anything I've ever experienced before running a practice.
Yeah.
I think it put a lot of pressure on immigration firms. There was a lot of people making requests for hiring. I know financially speaking, in terms of revenue and volume, it was our best period as a firm historically, just to kind of put it in perspective. I think that was anomalous in some respects. And I think you have some interesting things going on within the tech sector as well, John, that's driving this. A lot of these companies that were getting a lot of additional funding because they were viewed as traditional growth stocks are no longer viewed as growth stocks, they're mature stocks. The Fed raising interest rates has made money much more expensive to borrow. It makes it harder for people to invest. And I think that's forcing some of these companies to start doing layoffs or hiring freezes. I think it's going to be a great year for the H-1B lottery. I think we're going to have like the least amount of applicants that we've had in a long time. So for those who have been like aced out of getting an H-1B, there'll be some opportunity. But in terms of where firms are going, my best guess is like I'm looking at predicting, or at least I'm doing my budget forecasting for 2023 off of a 10 to 15% drop in revenue over 2022 levels.
I was at the ILT Conference in Las Vegas. I was speaking there, and then I was speaking about marketing, but they have panels about budgeting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been running your firm for several years, so you have like a track record. It's easier for you to probably budget. But can you talk about how people could do that if they're starting to get into it? And because how do you make a reliable budget? Because everything is just so crazy, kind of changes and all that kind of stuff. Do you have a team, like a company that you hire? Tell me more about how you do budgeting.
Well, I do it myself, which has served me well. But I take a very, very, very conservative approach. And that's always sort of helped. Like, for example, I've been fortunate in the practice over the past 10 years where we've had some really robust years. I've kept a lot of retained earnings. I like to have a buffer. So I have a special account where I keep enough capital to have the firm run for 3 months, even if we weren't to collect a dollar. So that gives me like a lot of a safety net in my opinion. And like honestly, one of the things that I'm proudest about during the pandemic, when we hit that in April, May of 2020, a lot of law firms were reducing benefits, were laying people off, or furloughing people. We didn't have to cut any of that stuff. We were able to keep everybody's salary static. We didn't have to let anybody go. And, we were able to maintain our benefit contribution level. So for me, the first thing I always look at is, creating a buffer zone in there. Some people do it with a line of credit, which is completely okay as well. If you're just getting, started and your bank is willing to give you a line of credit, that can serve the same sort of mechanism. Debt is not necessarily a bad thing. But what you have to understand is the cost of serving the debt and how it impacts your ability to continue to generate revenue for the firm. To your specific question about budgeting, first you have to look at your clientele. You have to look at your clientele to say to yourself, okay, what aspect of this is subject to recession? Which aspect of my clientele are institutional? And what aspects of my clientele are not really affected by recession? So if you have a family-based practice, which is primarily you're doing like marriage-based cases, K1s, that kind of thing, that's not really affected so much by a downturn in the economy like somebody that's looking to hire H-1B workers or do transfers. So you got to put that in perspective because that will allow you to start doing your forecasting. If you do business immigration, you have to look and say, okay, well, do we have corporate institutional clients? Do we have retainer agreements with companies that you can anticipate year over doing a certain amount of immigration work? And you have to look to see what their public announcements are and what kind of questions they're asking. Like, okay, to understand where their trends are going to be. People that do a removal practice, you're less affected by the economy and more affected by the government and policies, and that becomes your real existential threat to the organization is how those things change. So I think there's a multitude of factors. Being a lawyer, especially an immigration lawyer, is an interesting one from a budgeting perspective, John, because not only do you have to take into account the economy, but you have to take into account the government policy. And like the way we adjusted our practice during the Trump years versus how we're handling it with Biden, a lot of that has to do based on what's coming out of the White House. What language are they using? What sort of rhetoric? So yeah, I think it's law is a trickier, especially immigration law is a trickier field to budget from within. But certainly it's not impossible. You just have to have a multifaceted analysis. When I look at my monthly data, I'm always looking at year over reports. So I'll look back 2 or 3 years to see where the trends are. Also understanding your fixed and variable cost is extremely important. Variable costs you can turn down. If the economy is not humming and you're spending a lot of money on marketing, you can turn that down if you're not contractually obligated to do so. You can cut down on travel. Like, before you actually get into a posture where you're letting workers go, you have to understand which of your expenses you're committed to, like rent, like you can't really get out of it, versus things where you can sort of forego it for a little while until things shore up a little bit.
Is payroll something you can adjust, not let people go, but say, okay, either no bonuses or the salary decreases, or is it one of those things that's fixed once the number's out?
I mean, when we saw the first recession come along, it was quite common for people to furlough, put bench people, which you can't do if you're hiring an H-1B worker, by the way, or reduce hours, so a lot of law firms, you don't have to have everybody be a salaried employee. You can have some hourly employees and you can toggle down their hours. I think it's a tricky thing within a firm to lower salary. I think your idea about saying, look, like with bonuses, like, hey guys, like we can't do bonuses this year because of the economy. I think that's one thing where, bonus has this sort of connotation of not something that's necessarily guaranteed. When you start messing with people's salaries, especially in light of all the inflation that we have going on, I think it's a recipe for, resentment, losing staff quickly. And, I would try to avoid effectuating wages at all costs. Now, it could get to a point within the legal industry where law firms are reducing salaries as like a common aspect. And if you keep an idea on the trends, like certainly you can look at that as a mechanism of reducing overhead costs, but you don't want to do it knowing that this person has other alternatives at other firms.
Yeah. I want to jump in for a quick second and talk about one of our wonderful new sponsors, immigrationevaluationdirectory.com. Did you know research reports psychological evaluations can increase an asylum applicant's chance of approval by 78%? Psychological evaluations are hugely beneficial in hardship, cancellation, asylum, and other types of immigration cases, whether with USCIS or the Immigration Court. Connecting with qualified clinicians has never been easier thanks to the immigrationevaluationdirectory.com. Free to use, you can filter the directory by location, language, case type, and more, then review profiles and reach out. The Immigration Evaluation Directory is your one-stop resource to find the best therapists to help. Explore more today at immigrationevaluationdirectory.com and get the help that you need. Now, is there changes in employee expectations? So one aspect is if they're doing less billable hours, do you expect them to do more marketing or continue education, or what changes in the relationship when people might just have less work to do?
I mean, I already know what I'm going to be having my staff working on. If we do find ourselves slowing down, we've been growing at such a clip and we've been so busy for so long that like the infrastructure within the firm needs to be improved. And there's a lot of record keeping that we can get caught up on. There's policies that we can look at. So, John, when you're looking at these things like producing immigration, if obviously one way to increase revenue is to get more work and do more work. The other way to do it is to make your processes more efficient. How is your team processing a case? Like revisiting that can be a tremendous benefit. Incorporating technology. I know like on the practice management listserv, there's constant talk about what case management software to use and how to do that. Like that's one part of the equation, but maybe now's the time to revisit it. If you can lower your cost on producing a case, you can still attack a better revenue proportionality that will allow you to withstand a recession. So for me, I'm going to be talking to my senior people and be like, hey, listen, like, let's revisit this process, like the way we do an EB1, like, how can we make that more cost effective for the practice without sacrificing the quality? And these are things that we really want to dig into. So you got to look at it from like two sides. It's like, how do you make the case? And what is your cost of creating the case? Because most of us are billing a fixed fee. And then how, obviously like what the nature of the work and how you can change your practice to continue to get revenue whilst you're in a downturn.
Now, one of the things I saw and I felt the recession coming in the last two quarters is the increased demand for payment plans on these family cases that I do. Now, when you deal with corporate clients, I'm assuming they don't do payment plans per se, but they do invoicing and then they have late paying off the invoice. You're seeing more and more people taking more than 90 days, 180 days to pay their invoice.
Getting paid, it's always a problem, right? Especially with the corporate clients because, they're on 30, 60, 90 days. Um, I haven't really seen that. I think actually the situation with the individuals that you're talking about is more due to inflation rather than recession.
Yes, sir.
I think the cost of everything getting more expensive has forced people to spend less on things like legal services or have available disposable income to pay
Yeah.
for something like that. We did have one client, unfortunately, declare bankruptcy carrying a pretty big debt, and I would not wish that on anybody because the chances of you getting your money back are pretty slim. Like when you see the debtors line up and you go through the process, it's a little bit daunting. Um, Certainly, like talking to your clients about retainers is a good idea, especially if you have corporate clients. At least for us, we cover the filing fees for everybody. One of the things I've been thinking about, especially with the advent of the credit card being a means of processing, although we're not using it yet because of the errors and rejections, but
Yeah.
maybe having the client paying for that directly to lower the amount of money that we're putting out on top of
Yeah.
filings. So yeah, I do think at least within that case of the bankruptcy matter that I'm dealing with right now, that was certainly a result of economic downturn. The individuals, I really do think, at least for right now, is still an inflation-driven metric.
Mhm. Um, have you ever thought about switching up from a fixed fee to hourly structure? Have you ever analyzed the benefits, pros and cons of that?
Some cases we do hourly. For the most part, if it's a matter where I don't really feel like I have a handle on how long it's going to take, like, federal court litigation, um, picking up an RFE from another law firm, I mean, I'll do those hourly. Um, I think hourly is really, really good for the esoteric high-end work. And I think clients are okay with it on that front. But for standard visa stuff, I think there's a heavy preference to fixed fees because most of the companies are going to like push those costs down to the business unit that's making the request.
Hmm.
And like they want a number. They want a number that comes off of the budget. So I haven't really thought about rolling out hourly full stop.
And were you around doing this kind of stuff in 2000, 2009 when we had the last big recession?
Yeah. Yeah, I was.
And yeah, how is that? How did that go?
I mean, I think this actually goes, and the firm that I was working at the time, I had a very nice university and hospital-based practice.
Hmm.
And I actually learned something from them at that time is like a diversification of clientele can help you withstand economic downturn. So, if all of your clients are in the tech sector, you're going to be more dramatically affected by the recession than people that have a smattering of cases. Hospitals, even though there are some creaks in the foundation, are typically universities tend to have increased enrollment during recession because
Hmm.
people want to go back and get different education. So having university clients can be very beneficial. But to me, like um, having a diversification of your client type is an excellent way of balancing when you're dealing with a potential recession. And certainly, that's what really helped that particular firm that I was working with back during the last one kind of weather the storm. On a personal level, I do remember the volume of work that we were doing like decreased substantially, but um, on the whole, that's what was their saving grace.
So I guess the key takeaway is have that cash balance to hold you over in case
Yeah,
something pops up. Adjust spending. It's kind of household kind of stuff as well that the person would do. I end up increasing practice areas to kind of make up for any losses. Do you do H2Bs and stuff like that?
yeah, we do a lot of H-2B work. I love the H-2B program. Personally, I think we need like a year-round low-skilled visa classification, but I'll save that for another discussion.
Well, what kind of jobs are you doing? Is it hotel workers or farm workers? I don't do that category yet.
So
Farm is a
farm,
different category, right?
yeah, farms H2A. H2B is your temporary seasonal stuff. For us, it's like people down the Jersey Shore
Mm-hmm.
or, working in factories that have a higher output during certain years. A lot of resorts,
Yeah.
deal in the H2B program. Um, but there's been no slowdown of requests on that front. They still can't find people to do the work. So, H2B has become like a really great practice area for the firm.
How do you price that? Because I mean, it's low skilled workers, the amount they're gonna pay is not that much, but I'm guessing they're gonna want like 20, 30 people. So the firm kind of makes it up on volume on a flat rate, or how do you price a case like it's not EB1A where it's a one-off like high skilled person. Like
Yeah, it's a great question. Without giving specifics, we charge a base fee
Mhm.
for the temporary labor certification, then we charge an amount per worker.
I see.
So the more it really becomes economical if they're using a lot of them. If
Exactly,
you're
yeah.
if you want one H2B person, it's really not worth it. But if you're doing 10, 15, 20, then it becomes a great classification.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So it's because I remember when I first started, I had a friend who got one and he was doing the research for it and stuff. I'm like, this is going to cost a lot for one person. Like, it's just, it doesn't make sense unless the person really needed it really bad and they're just going to do it.
I mean, it's a labor certification, so it's like going through perm, but at a very fast pace.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty much it. But it's to show like, recessions aren't created equal. They
Hmm.
affect different markets for different reasons. And I think honestly, like understanding your practice is a critical part of it. Like, where are your clients? Are they going to be affected? Are they not going to be affected? Like, take stock of what you have going on. And if you don't have a line of credit, and if I would get one if you don't have that safety net in terms of finances lined up.
Hmm.
Um, Again, I don't think debt's bad as long as you know how to manage your debt.
Yeah.
So,
And, during these times, it's a good way to pick up talent. So if, some other firm couldn't, keep talent because of management or thing, might have some great lawyers that you could pick up during this time. So just got
I
to,
mean,
comes with,
yeah, that's what they're saying about the tech sector. Like the guys that are really good and having reputations, they're having no problem getting jobs after being laid off.
yeah.
So I would agree. I mean, I think it's going to hold for lawyers. I think there's going to be a lot of good opportunity for hiring coming up.
I
But
appreciate
it will be interesting, man. It'll be very interesting. I do think this is going to be unlike anything we've seen before, and hopefully it'll be very short-lived.
Yeah, we'll catch up again, do a play by play as it's happening, and look back on this later to see how it went. Any plans for the holiday season? You guys close up shop for last week, or partially closed, or how do you do it?
We go to skeleton staff, make sure people are there to answer the phones. A lot of people are traveling during the holidays, so it is important to be available. But we try to give as much people time off as we can. And then personally, yeah, gonna really looking forward to spending some time with the family. Yeah,
Any trips, or you stay at home?
we're going to Florida, which is where my wife and I are renting a minivan and we're loading the kids up
Oh
and we're
wow,
we're,
drop.
we're road tripping to Florida. So it
How
should
many
be
hours is
interesting. Oh, it's only 15, ain't nothing.
that? Are you gonna stop on the way there, or just go one all the way there?
I think we're gonna do a weekend in Savannah and
Oh, neat.
yeah, check out some of the sites down there. So
And that's a fun one. As a kid, those are the things you remember. Those kind of road trips you always remember.
yeah, no, it's gonna be good. And the girls like to have the captain's chair. They think the minivan's like the coolest car on the planet.
Yeah.
I'm starting to agree. So
The space is good. I mean, I thought it'd be hard finding those to even rent in the first place. Like, just every time I go rent a car, they always have like small cars, and when you ask for big ones or SUVs, they like give you the smallest one. It's like hard getting the car you want.
yeah, yeah. But minivans are pretty good as far as getting them. So,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I got 3 kids now. I'm on the verge of looking into it, of getting the minivan, just because I really want the captain's chairs. It makes life much easier having
it
those two.
does. Check out the Kia Carnival, I think it's called.
Oh, it's a new one or something?
Yeah, it's new. That's nice. Um,
Yeah, check it out. I was looking at my wife was showing a video. Some of them have like vacuums in there to clean up, and
yeah,
TVs that get camera in the back, so you don't have to turn around to see. So it's pretty neat stuff.
awesome,
Thank
brother.
you. Thanks for coming on the show again. We'll definitely catch up soon. Have a great holiday season. And anyone who's listening to this show who's that active about immigration and business and stuff like that, they're gonna figure out the way through it. It's just because you just gotta keep your eyes open and be sharp about it. Don't just snooze your way into it. Don't sleep your walk into way into it. If you, as long as you keep your wits about you, you'll make it out the other side.
For sure, man, for sure. And like I look forward to catching up on the next one when we're in the middle of it.
For sure, John. Good seeing
All
you.
right, bro. Take care.
Have a
Happy
good one.
holidays.